Right, so I'll just start off with a quick introduction to myself before I hand it over to Alexis, who is our Fireside chat speaker. But hi, my name is Samantha Oying. As you've probably already seen me a couple times during this hackathon, I'm the founder and executive director of Superposition Toronto, the organization behind this hackathon, the Superpositron. And in terms of my background in blockchain, I've been working in the space for the past year or year and a half, somewhere somewhere in that region. And what I'm most interested about in terms of blockchain is blockchain for social impact. So a lot of people associate blockchain with like cryptocurrencies, but I'm more so interested in ways blockchain can be used for things like plastic pollution or female empowerment. And you'll get to hear a lot about those different topics in today's talk as well. And so in the past, I've built a couple different projects related to, I guess, the social impact. So I built a DApp, or decentralized application, for land registration or property registration. And I've also built this sort of framework to prevent cyber attacks on nuclear power plants that also use blockchain. And currently, my involvement in blockchain, I work as a smart contract developer at a global fintech company. And I'm also currently doing research with a professor at Waterloo on smart contract evolution. Yeah, super excited about the space and what it has to offer. And I think I'll just hand it over to Alexis for a quick introduction.
Sure. Thank you so much, Samantha. Thank you for having me here today. And thank you everyone for joining us, because I know you must be really, really tired. So for a little bit about me, my name is Alexis Pappas. I've been in the blockchain industry for about 4 years, which is in blockchain years is probably more like 10 years because it evolves so quickly and it's just so emerging. And I've been in the technology sector as a consultant, a researcher, a writer, and various other things for about 10 years. So I first got started in blockchain when I was working with a company that had a really incredible technology that could take waste gas from oil and gas development, gas that's usually flared into the air and, has a really high CO2 impact and, is also very hazardous to workers, and could turn it into gas that was ready to be used in generators to generate power. So it was this really efficient system for cleaning gas. But the problem was that the well sites that we were looking at were really far away from pipelines. They were really far away from really anywhere where you would need to generate electricity. So I was trying to think of what's the best use for this gas. It's not really worth putting on a truck and taking out of the site. Don't really need to consume any more energy at the site. So I developed a project to mine cryptocurrency at these remote well sites all over Alberta. And that was sort of my first introduction to blockchain. And while that was more on the cryptocurrency and Bitcoin side, the more I started looking into the technology, the more I realized that, as the title of this, this fireside chat says, that blockchain has the power to change the world across a whole bunch of different ways. So blockchain really became, from that point on, my main focus in my career. I started doing some work on some really innovative blockchain projects based out of some companies here in Calgary, including digital identity, smart contracts, some fintech. And I also became the executive director of the Canadian Blockchain Association for Women. So much like with Samantha, a huge focus of my interest is on the social impact of blockchain and the ways that it can be used, especially to make a much more inclusive world. I'm also a director at the Canadian Blockchain Consortium, our national organization for the promotion and advocacy of blockchain technology in industry and government. And I'm just signing on with a blockchain company called Guild One right now as their Chief Innovation Officer. So that's a little bit about me. Originally in technology, my field was hydrogen and clean energy, as well as some other ESG focused disruptive technologies. So it's amazing to me that everything's kind of come full circle. And now I'm working on a lot of projects that kind of merge those two worlds and support blockchain as a way of promoting more clean energy development and helping clean energy technologies work better. So that's a little bit about me, and really looking forward to the discussion today.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, what you're saying about like merging the two worlds, I think that's kind of what I found as well when I realized like blockchain can be used for female empowerment in developing countries. And like the whole, empowering females in STEM as like with this hackathon and the organization, and also like blockchain, I was just able to put those two together, and like putting two interests together is just honestly like it's a really it's a really great experience too, or great feeling to experience. Um, as you said, like with clean energy and blockchain. So I guess blockchain is quite like a niche sort of topic. Not that many people know too much about it, as with a lot of the people here as well are complete beginners to it as well. But it is quite up and coming. You've been hearing a lot about blockchain in the news, hearing about NFTs and all of that. So it's a topic that people really want to get into. So what do you think are some of the hardest parts to explain to others about blockchain, and some of the common misconceptions that people have?
Absolutely. And I spend a lot of my time explaining to people what blockchain is. So this is something I can definitely speak to. The biggest challenge that I have when trying to give people a sense of, the impact of blockchain and the types of things that it can be used for, is that there's still this really dominant belief that cryptocurrency and blockchain are the same thing. So differentiating the two and explaining that, cryptocurrency is the use of blockchain technology for digital assets and certain types of financial services, and kind of segmenting them is usually the first thing that I do. Everyone's got their own definition of blockchain. You'll probably hear, dozens of them from different people, but the way I like to explain it is more in terms of the actual impact of blockchain and the value that it has. So for me, I focus on two key concepts with blockchain. The first one is that it's a database where all of the data can be trusted. It's encrypted. It can never be altered. It's immutable, is a word you'll hear a lot. So you know that in this digital database, you can trust all this information. The second concept is that this information is shared. The databases are distributed. They're decentralized. Everyone who's permissioned, in the case of a permission network, to view this data has access to it, and it's fully automated. So there's no need for any sort of manual processes involved in sharing the data. It's done automatically. So when you have a database where all the information is trusted, you don't need anyone to verify that it's true. You know that it hasn't been changed. And where it's shared, it's already distributed among all the people who need to see this information. Then you can do a lot of amazing things with that technology. One of the most important things is that you can automate a lot of things that are currently manual. So in business and government today, there's a tremendous amount of literal pieces of paper and manual hours of someone's time that are spent verifying data, making sure that it's true before a transaction or any other kind of event that you might be using this data for. There's also a ton of people who are employed just in really transferring that data and making sure data gets to the right person. With blockchain, all of this is done automatically. And then in the cases of cryptocurrency and digital assets and other financial services, that's just another layer on top of this database that enables that data to be used in finance in that same kind of streamlined, automated way, without needing all of these different people to check the data or manage the data. So that's kind of my simple explanation, and one that I found really helps it resonate with people, because you can see the impact. When you look at big office towers in any downtown of a city, you can picture maybe between 25 to 30% of those floors of those office buildings being taken up by people who are responsible right now for verifying data, moving data. This includes administrators, accountants, lawyers. With blockchain, it's all automated. And you can just imagine how much that's going to change the world when it's implemented across all of these different industries and all of these different government departments.
Yeah, I really like the explanation you gave of blockchain using the impact to explain what it does, because I think even in our first blockchain workshop of this entire hackathon, someone asked in the chat, well, what do you use dApps for? And I honestly just went like, well, yeah, that's a good question because it can be used for so many different things. And it is pretty difficult to explain what blockchain is because you're trying to like explain the architecture, but then there's like more to the architecture and then you want to explain more because you know there's like gaps that you have to fill. And then like when you're knowledgeable about the topic, you feel like there's stuff that still has to be explained. And so you just keep going down that rabbit hole of trying to explain more and more, but you realize that you're definitely confusing them. And so I've always had a pretty difficult time trying to explain blockchain to people in just like a quick 5 minutes. And I always feel like I'm leaving something out. So it's also a really big challenge for me to do so. So I think that's something I can definitely take away from this, explaining blockchain through the actual impact and use that it has. I think we got a question in the chat. Shaylee asked, can you explain the burning?
Okay, so like the burning of tokens, I'm going to be totally upfront with you that for really detailed technical questions, I'm probably not going to give the best explanations. So in terms of how you, in terms of how you actually, dispose of a digital asset, I'm afraid that's a little bit outside of my wheelhouse.
I can try and take a little bit of it, like a jab at that. So in terms of burning, it's like when you just send crypto, you send something to an address, but that address doesn't actually exist. But because you can't just like get it back, then it's like it's just gone. That's
okay. Yeah, I have a different definition of burning. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's essentially what burning is. So that's why they always want you to make sure that you are sending your things to the right address. And so they have different sorts of mechanisms in place to ensure that you're not typing it in wrong, because it is like a really long string. Don't exactly remember how many like characters it is. I know it differentiates between different sort of platforms as well, but it's usually like 25 or like up to 50. And so it's usually just like a copy paste. Sometimes people also just have it on a piece of paper written down so you can be more secure. And with that, they don't want you to like accidentally mess things up. So they also have something in place where they don't use like zeros and O's because that can be easily mistaken when you're writing it down. And they have like, I forgot what it was called. I think it was base 58 check encoding to ensure that you're also not making any sort of typos. And so it doesn't just like have you burn those tokens. Right.
Thank you for taking that.
Awesome. I hope I was able to answer a little bit of that question as well. But yeah, I know this being a Women in STEM hackathon and you also being the the executive director of the Canadian Blockchain Association for Women, there's a lot of overlap with our interests here. So I kind of just wanted to know about your take on that, how it's been like leading that organization as well.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. It's a great organization composed of a really big variety of women across all kinds of areas of the blockchain industry. Some of our board members come from some of the major accounting firms like Deloitte. Some of them come more out of fintech. We have one woman who's the CEO of several blockchain payments companies. And really, we all just came together because we noticed that at every event that we went to, there was never a lineup for the women's restroom. And so this has become something that's, kind of this barometer for us of the state of inclusion in our industry. that, when we go to these big conferences, the last one I went to was Bitcoin 2021, which was held down in Miami in June. Really, you can just walk right into the restroom. So we decided that we needed an organization that was going to serve as a really good vehicle for promoting the industry to women who are interested in exploring careers. And we hold a lot of events designed to do this. We have a number of different initiatives that are designed to support women's education in the industry. And we also serve as, kind of a networking organization, because that's one of the key things that women really need when they get into the industry, is they need to start building a really strong network of mentors, women who can give them advice and help them, navigate the landscape. Women who can make introductions to, different companies that might be looking to hire staff in their area of expertise, or really just help them understand some of the challenges that they might face in the industry. So I've been the executive director for about 2 years now. Been really excited about the progress we've made and some of our future plans. And I really want to say, kind of just starting off, that it's critical that we do have more women and non-binary people coming into the blockchain industry. Right now, statistics, it's not measured very well, but suggests that there's anywhere from about 15% to maybe about 20% female representation in blockchain. And one of the questions that I get asked a lot, and a lot of the time it's by, men really, is, well, why does the industry need more women? And a friend and I were talking about this the other day. And she was telling me about an episode of Dragon's Den that she watched, where a group of men, I guess apparently, were sitting around trying to figure out, what kind of product they could develop for the female market. And the product they came up with is called the period glove. And it's a plastic glove that women are supposed to wear, when they have their periods, to do, whatever, changing things, because periods are just that gross. And we were laughing about it, and we were, kind of saying to each other, like, we need more women in technology, because men are not going to design technologies necessarily that are going to work for women. Much like this kind of ridiculous example of, yeah, exactly. I just noticed the comment in the questions, and in the chat rather, and that's exactly what we were saying. Like, this is the kind of thing that happens. And when you look through history, there are so many cases of this. So the first artificial hearts actually didn't work for women. And this was a surprise to the men who developed them, because they didn't account for differences in female anatomy. The first artificial intelligence voice recognition systems couldn't recognize women's voices, because they were originally programmed for a much lower register. And it was a surprise to the inventors that, these AI systems didn't work for women. And if we want, and I believe that blockchain is going to be an enormous part of the world. It's going to be something which is going to be ingrained into so many of the different ways that we work, that we live, that we especially access services. And unless women are a part of this development process, then it's not going to work for everyone. It's going to work for the people who designed it, who are coming from that viewpoint. And right now that's predominantly male. And another colleague of mine, a brilliant woman, was working on a project to develop an app that would help women in Africa basically access markets for their products. It was kind of like a supply chain management app that helped them access people who could transport whatever it was that they were selling. And she came into the project, and it was being developed by men. And the way that the men had developed it, it actually revealed all kinds of identifying information about the women, where they lived, what their schedules were, and even like bios and profiles of them, to the men who were intended to access that app for, basically gig jobs doing delivery. And this was in a country that had one of the highest rates of sexual assault in the world. And it never occurred to the men designing the app that they were putting these women in danger by exposing all of this information to men who had signed up for the app. And that's exactly why we need more women in the industry, because they're going to design systems that work for women.
Yeah, I totally echo those viewpoints as well. I know our keynote speaker and one of our judges, Dr. Ravi Sterling, she was also talking about this in a conversation I had with her a little while back, about how we really need to just involve the people who are actually going to be using those products. Otherwise, like, if it doesn't work for them, then like there's just no point to them, right? And so she works a lot in like humanitarian sort of services. And I was also talking about how I was working on this one project. It was involving sort of like children with hearing impairments, and we're looking at past projects where they're trying to like translate ASL to English, and they're doing it with this sort of hand gesture glove. And we didn't know at the time, because like none of us have hearing impairments, or anyone like directly in our circle that has hearing impairments. But when we actually spoke to people and teachers and educators that had experience with them, they said that is definitely not going to work. And they started explaining to us how like ASL isn't just like with hands. You can't just like have a glove and it'll like be able to translate that, because it's based on like positioning of the hands as well, and also facial expression. And that was like such a shock to us, even after doing like the research. And we thought we're like kind of knowledgeable about the topic as well, but you don't get that information until you actually start talking to the people.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that, the more I see these amazing, talented women all over the world starting to build, different types of blockchain applications specifically for women, especially in developing countries, the more you realize how essential this is, because a lot of these things are just coming right from that female perspective, from that empathy and understanding of the needs of these women. And not to say that men can't make incredibly valuable contributions to these technologies and these applications, but they're not going to come from the same place of knowledge and understanding.
Yeah, we definitely need that sort of diversity and perspectives to actually make these products work. Yeah, I guess turning it back to like the blockchain aspect. So what are some of the interesting ways that you've seen blockchain being used to benefit the world in the past couple of years?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite topics, and it's definitely the thing that kind of captivated me the most when I started learning about it. And I think looking at blockchain's impact on the world, especially when it comes to the environment, there are really two critical ways where blockchain is making a big difference. The first one is that it's helping us understand what our actual impact is, because blockchain can help us measure and track and kind of instantly look back and see the impact of, say a product throughout its entire supply chain, from resource extraction to manufacturing, and in some cases to, whether or not it's been recycled at the end of that value chain. We can get a much better understanding and much better data visibility into what our actual impact on the world is. And the second thing, and this is really powerful, is that blockchain can be used to incentivize changes in behavior. We all understand that, we should recycle. We all understand that there are steps that we can take in our lives to, help make the world a better place, reduce our waste, that kind of thing. But when it comes to, in particular, big corporations, then incentives can really be a powerful factor in helping them do the right thing. So one of the things that I focus most on in my career is renewable energy. And in the case of renewable energy, there are some very interesting ways that blockchain can be used to support the development of more projects. The CEO of Twitter, his name is Jack Dorsey, who also founded a payments company called Square, recently put out a white paper called Bitcoin is the Key to an Abundant Clean Energy Future. And it basically showed this model for if you have Bitcoin mining integrated into the development of solar projects, then you can actually fund them before the lengthy process, before that energy is onto the grid and you're getting paid for it, through using the power during that kind of in-between state where it's not making any money for Bitcoin mining and generating revenue. And then with solar, there's another issue where, typically there's excess power that's generated during non-peak hours for the grid. And storing that energy is a really big challenge for solar projects. So by using that energy to mine Bitcoin during those off hours, you can generate another source of revenue for the company and find a way to repurpose that energy. And according to Square in this white paper, that's something that could be a massive support for more large-scale solar projects. There are some other interesting ways around energy decentralization. Now that more and more people are installing solar power in their homes, a company called Power Ledger, based out of Australia, has used blockchain to create a distributed microgrid where all of the people who have these solar installations are connected on a blockchain grid, and they're able to use tokens for peer-to-peer transactions and sell each other power or sell power to local businesses right from their own solar arrays, which is really cool. And I've spoken to a lot of people in renewables who think that that kind of distribution, decentralization, the way that blockchain can enable these small scale developments that are scattered across a whole city, that's going to be, one of the big future power sources. I would also look to carbon credits. So when you, as a company, say as an energy production company, when you sequester, say a ton of carbon, by instead of venting it into the atmosphere, by taking that carbon and putting it into, a secure deep underground cavern, you can generate something called carbon credits. And tokenization using blockchain is really building the future of that market. So with blockchain, you can measure on the ledger that carbon, that volume of carbon, as it's getting, basically saved from being vented into the atmosphere. And you can automatically turn that into a carbon credit that company can use either to offset some of its other emissions or trade on an international market. And that's a really, really exciting project, because right now in the carbon credit market, you could basically say whatever you want. None of that information is really trusted. There's nothing to stop you as a company, as an unscrupulous company, from, sequestering a ton of carbon and then issuing, 10 different credits based on that same tonnage. So the market has a lot of challenges because people have a hard time being able to trust the data that backs those credits. And through blockchain, you can not only do that, but then you can automatically take the data and turn it into a fungible token and trade it on an international market. And that's going to incentivize, because it's another revenue source, a lot of companies to do more in terms of reducing their emissions.
Yeah, I heard about a company with a sort of similar structure with incentivizing. It was called Plastic Bank, and essentially they're targeting plastic pollution in oceans. And so they're able to exchange plastic that you might find on the beach for these tokens, or also recycling the plastics as well if you're a company. And so you're also able to just, like, track through the entire supply chain, like with QR codes and everything. You can apparently scan like a piece of plastic and you can figure out like, oh yeah, this percentage of this plastic was actually from this source and this other percentage was from this source. So you're like looking at the composition of the plastic. And I think that's super cool. You can trace all of that through blockchain because of its immutability and like its uses in the supply chain as well. It's that's a lot. That's I guess an application I've been looking at a lot, the use of blockchain in supply chain management, because I mean, supply chains are used like in pretty much like almost every sort of like industry, whether it be like with agriculture or I know with like shipping out vaccines as well. They all use supply chains of some sort, and there's a lot of intermediaries there. And so I found that application pretty interesting as well. So I guess, oh, did you want to say something? Sorry.
Yeah, actually, I am speaking at a blockchain and supply chain conference called Supply Change, which is coming up in, I think it's in early October. I'll make sure to send you an invite. You might find a lot of the talks really interesting. And yeah, I wanted to say like waste collection credits, that's a fantastic use case for blockchain and tokenization as well. And I just wanted to mention one more, because this one I'm really passionate about and I think it's so cool. Is, and a lot of people don't know this, that when you have, say, an acre of trees, and everyone knows that all of those trees are taking in CO2 and they're putting out oxygen, and they're basically a sink. There's something that's taking in and processing a whole bunch of carbon. There are some really cool projects going on, including one that I'm involved with, to help support land preservation by helping people monetize the carbon sink potential of forests or grasslands or whatever it is, through being able to generate tokens, basically carbon credit tokens, based on the sink potential of that, say acre of land or acre of forest. There's a really big one happening right now in the Amazon. And when people are able, because a big part of why, forests like the Amazon are getting destroyed at the rate they are is because people need money. People have to monetize, unfortunately, sometimes some of our most precious resources, like these ancient jungles and ancient forests. And if you can give them an alternative, kind of incentive for not developing that land, for not allowing farmers to use it, then, you can support a huge amount of conservation, just by making it economical for people to be able to do it.
Sounds honestly really awesome. I haven't heard about that sort of application, but I'd love to know more as well.
Yeah.
But I guess bringing it back to female empowerment, what we're all about here, what are some ways that blockchain is being used for female empowerment?
Yeah, this one, it's such an important topic, because the world is a very, very unequal place. And I think sometimes in, say, North America or Europe, it's really easy to forget that there are still countries around the world where women need the signatures of male relatives to get a bank account. That there are these huge barriers to entry for a lot of women in participating in financial services, in being able to start companies, even something as simple as being able to have identification that just belongs to them. So a couple of months ago, my organization hosted an event called Women in the New Economy, and it was all about the different ways that women could participate in the blockchain and crypto industries, ways that they could use specialization in those areas to jumpstart their careers across all kinds of different industries. And we had a great breakout room discussion where one woman who was from an African country, I think it was the Sudan, was talking about how, because of her family situation, she wasn't able to get the signature of a male relative or, husband, whatever, to be able to get a bank account. And she literally couldn't get a bank account. but she was able to open a cryptocurrency wallet with no problems whatsoever. There are no barriers to entry apart from, really some technology access for women to fully and equally participate in the blockchain economy. And that's so important. So right now, there are about 1.7 people around the world who don't have a bank account and don't have access to any financial services. And you can imagine what this means for their lives. You can't borrow money or access credit. You can't safely store money. You have very few opportunities to advance economically if you're outside of the financial system. So the majority of these people without access to bank accounts are actually women, about 55%. And some of that is because of these structural reasons that, women are prevented from accessing these types of services unless, they have, say, the signature of their husband. And a really big part as well is because women are less likely to have identification than men. And, you can't access, banking services typically if you don't have ID. So most of the projects around the world that are focused on, really empowering women are addressing those two key issues, that there's an unequal access to financial services and that there's an unequal access to identity. UN Women launched an amazing project, I believe it was last year, that's basically offering microcredit services to women to help grow their businesses using blockchain. There are all kinds of digital identity projects that are focused on women in conflict, prone areas or areas that are experiencing these economic or social disruptions. To help them access, secure digital identity and banking services. And there's some really, really cool ones that are finding ways to help basically create, tiny portable networks that let women access these services, even if they don't have access to an internet connection. And that's really, really important because there's a big crossover between the unbanked and people without access to ID and people who don't have stable access to the internet. So there are so many brilliant minds around the world finding solutions to these problems at all levels. And it's just really amazing to see.
Yeah, and I was reading, I think a couple days ago as well, that the opportunity there is huge because of the fact that, they still don't have access to financial services or a bank account. But I think like 60% or 80% of them in developing countries now actually do have access to mobile phones. So they are able to actually like access a cryptocurrency wallet and get access to financial services through that aspect. And aside from like IDs or financial services, like something I focused on or did a project on was like land registration. And that's also, I guess, incorporated into that aspect of financial services or like economic empowerment, because of course, like properties are like financial assets, and without properties, then that's a lot of it's a great barrier to rising through the ranks of the economy, right? And that was one thing I thought that was super interesting as well. I mean, aside from the fact that you literally don't have any like official documents that state that this is your property, this is where you live, and so you technically don't have a home anymore. That's the other aspect to it, the fact that you can't claim any property to use to gain that economic empowerment that you need.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to hear more about your land registry project, actually, because that is, as you said, that's really, really critical, just being able to establish ownership rights and title. Yeah. What part of the world were you looking at developing that in?
I think there were some countries that are actually already starting to implement that. I can't exactly remember which African country. I think it might have been Ghana, but the actual distribution of people who have land registries there and who don't is like 80% of them don't actually have land titles, which is kind of insane. That's like 80% of people can't actually state that this property is mine. So that was one area I was looking into the most. Another area was, I think, Haiti, because actually after the 2010 earthquake, a lot of people lost their homes. Farmers weren't able to claim their property. And the reason for that was because all the information that they had was just stored on paper in their government buildings. And so earthquake came, wiped all of that out, and they couldn't actually claim the fact that this was their land. And so right now they're still like fighting over like what land is theirs. And that's one thing that I think kind of hit home, because I'm sure I think we're old enough to remember the 2010 Haiti earthquake, even though we were quite young. And the last area I think was Honduras. So the government there actually, they actually like have some sort of corruption. And so they were actually just going in and changing the information so that they're placing other people's lands under their own name, and they're just able to do that, but because there's nothing preventing that, right? So you couldn't do anything about it. So these are like the areas that I was looking at.
Very, very cool. And, I think a great point, to end that part of the conversation on is that when women in developing countries are empowered, it has an enormous benefit on the community as a whole. Women are much more likely to reinvest in their communities. They're much more likely to, build businesses that offer employment to other people. Women are really the drivers of economic growth, kind of from the bottom up in all of these countries. So when you empower women, you're benefiting, these countries in the world as a whole. And that's why I love things like, the Land Registry Project and microcredit lending on blockchain to women, because it just has this reverberating effect. And it's truly one of the most effective ways to make the world a better place.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess bridging off of the whole women empowerment aspect, I mean, as a female entrepreneur and pretty involved in the tech industry, have you dealt with imposter syndrome in the past?
Yeah, it's definitely something that I've experienced a lot of. So, with the kind of work that I do, really diverse types of project management and white papers, and I'm constantly exploring all of these different areas for technology applications. What that means is that I'm pretty much constantly around people who know more than me about, whichever area I happen to be working in at that time. Most people in technology are fairly specialized. So just being around people who have such a great depth of knowledge about a particular type of technology or a particular application, it's obviously going to make you feel, you're constantly around people who know so much more than you do. And that definitely breeds all of those kinds of confidence issues and other symptoms of imposter syndrome. So I think that the way that I, kind of manage through that is to recognize, as I hope everyone does, that everyone brings their own unique set of skills to the table. In my case, it's more synthesis, it's more connecting different ideas and using the diversity of my knowledge to help make a project, grow and thrive, rather than drilling really deep into one particular topic. Another thing that I would say for imposter syndrome is, according to a KPMG study from last year, 75% of women in business experience it at one time or another. So we're all kind of in the same boat. Everyone goes through these crises of confidence, especially when they're starting something new, times when they feel like they're out of their league and maybe that, they're at a disadvantage when it comes to experience or knowledge to the people around them. But it's really the people who are coming from the outside that I think have a tremendous amount to offer. When people are working closely together and they're very sort of into their silo, groupthink is something that, develops really easily in companies. Their kind of field of vision becomes very sort of constricted. And it's the outsiders, the people who might not necessarily have the depth of knowledge, but can bring in new perspectives who have a ton to contribute. So I would definitely say that, it's something that most people experience at one time or another. It's something where I think that you can take it and you can kind of turn it into a bit of an advantage, that you're coming from this outsider perspective. And that's one of the reasons that you're so valuable. And I think that, by being open about it, I love that, you asked that question, that it can become normalized and people can, I guess, kind of get away from the more debilitating part of it, which is that you feel alone in it and that you feel ashamed to talk about it. So yeah, thanks for including that.
Yeah, I've definitely struggled with imposter syndrome a lot as like a woman interested in technology and engineering. And I mean, I've talked to a lot of people about this topic as well, and I think it's something that you can't exactly escape. Like even like for however long you're in the industry for, you'll probably still feel those similar feelings, even if you're super established already.
Mhm.
And I guess my way of combating that is just realizing that you can't exactly combat it and it's just going to happen, but you just have to push through it and realize your place, and again also realize that you bring in that new perspective as well, as you said.
Yeah, it's realizing, your value and that there are so many different types of value. And the other thing I would say about it is that with imposter syndrome, there are two factors. The first one is internal. This is your own self-perception. This is your own, sort of challenges with confidence. It's your own assessment and valuation of your capabilities. But then there's also an external component too. And it's important to be able to differentiate them. Do you feel welcomed where you are? Do you feel valued by the environment and culture that you're working in? Are you receiving, messages, somehow, whether it's from the media or from people that you're working with, that you don't kind of belong there? So there's two fronts, and I think that they both have to be addressed very differently, because the first one is about self-love, it's about self-care, it's about also having a realistic understanding of whether or not the people around you are maybe quite as expert as you think they are, because especially in blockchain, a lot of the time we're all just kind of making it up as we go along. And then the second is the external is cultural changes. So about 50% of all women end up leaving the technology industry by the age of 35. And the most commonly cited reason is a non-inclusive culture, which basically means that they don't feel like they belong. So there are these external forces that we can all collaboratively work together on combating, as well as the internal ones that I think, is sort of part of self-care for everyone, to build our confidence and build our faith in ourselves.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. Creating a space where everyone feels that they belong is really something that we've tried to do here at the hackathon as well. And I know I've definitely experienced that a lot of times in my life, especially in my own school as well, because there aren't that many other people who are interested in the same topics that I'm interested in. So it was, I mean, not just females, but even males as well, because tech is just not sort of one of the focuses of my school. So that's something I've definitely had to tell myself throughout the past couple of years as well.
Definitely. And I mean, this really goes, doubly for people who identify as non-binary as well, because they're so much less likely to see role models around them.
Mhm.
There's so little information and experience kind of available for, how they as people who, identify as non-binary can fit in with these cultures and navigate these types of spaces. So yeah, I think, it's something where everyone's just got to support each other and recognize that we're all kind of in the same boat. And we all, I think, want to change the world and be a part of, the future evolution through these types of technologies. And I think that, kind of recognizing that can help a lot in getting away from those types of issues.
And I guess to just end off the fireside chat with one last question, what advice would you give to the young women here who might be hesitant to move forward in the tech industry?
Yeah, and absolutely, because there are a lot of reasons why. Like I just mentioned, a lot of women do end up leaving. There are plenty of scary statistics out there. There was a big study in Silicon Valley that found that half of all the women that they surveyed at these big tech companies experienced pretty serious sexual harassment at work. So there are some barriers and obstacles to women in tech for sure. And I would leave off with first of all, saying that you can't underestimate the benefits of having a mentor. Someone who's been in the industry a while, has learned how to navigate these challenges, understands, sort of the culture and how things work. Having a mentor is invaluable and something that's been shown to help women stay in tech and to advance much faster than they otherwise would. I think my next piece of advice would be that looking inside, self-reflection is so essential to understanding where you as an individual person fit into the industry. And if you can identify those things that you're the most passionate about, like you, Samantha, with social good applications for blockchain, when you hit on those things that really make you feel passionate about what you do, then that's something that's just going to act as this massive accelerant for you in your career. And so, doing that research, doing that self-exploration, and figuring out the thing that you would be happy doing, for the next 10 years of your life. I think it's something that people don't do enough of. People are often more focused on, where the career opportunities are, or what they think they should be doing. Figure out what it is that you want and go after it. And yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, I definitely echo that advice as well. I think it's some great advice, especially the one about mentorship. I didn't realize the actual advantage of having a mentor and the actual benefits that they would be able to bring until I was able to talk to some of these issues with a lot of people in my network. I mean, I could consider you one of my mentors too as well. And just being able to talk to so many different people who've been in the industry longer than I have with some amazing advice and some amazing perspectives as well has really just broadened my worldview, I'd say.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Alexis, so much for speaking with us today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I hope the judging goes really well. I'm looking forward to seeing the winning projects, and I hope everyone gets a really good rest tonight.
Yeah, for
Thank
sure.
you for being.
Everyone's probably been sleeping just maybe a couple hours the past few days because I know working on a project is something that's not easy to do when you only have 36 hours to.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. Well, thank you so much for coming once again.
Awesome. Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Bye.